All right. So I'm here to talk about Ladybird, which is a browser. Does anybody here not use a browser? No? Okay. You all know what it is? Liar. All right. So I am Andreas Kling. I am a lifelong browser nerd. I've been doing browsers my whole adult life, and today I'm the founder of the Ladybird Browser Initiative. And you can find me on the web or email me if you have ideas about browsers. So to illustrate what I mean by a lifelong browser nerd, these are the browser engines that I've worked on in my life, starting back in 2005, so 20 years ago, working on the KHTML engine and KDE, for those of you who were around for that. Later had a job at Nokia working on Qt WebKit. Then I worked at Apple on WebKit and the Safari browser. And since 2019, I'm doing the Ladybird project. So let's start with a meme. I promise I won't try to be funny a lot, but so you may have seen this. If you're not in on the joke because you're not super into browsers, the thing here is that all of the browsers are essentially Chromium under the hood, right? So Chrome, Brave, Vivaldi, Edge, Opera, all of these guys, they're just taking Chromium and then putting a little bit of value add on top. When Peter puts on the glasses, he sees this, and that's the state of the business. But the way I like to visualize this is with a Venn diagram. So in the left circle here, we have the engine from Google, which is Chromium. And all of these browsers here are building on top of Chromium. And in the right circle, we have money from Google. So these guys are essentially receiving huge paychecks for sending all the search queries to the Google search engine. And that's how they are funded, more or less. And when we talk about Google money, that really means advertising money that they make from selling ads on their search result pages, right? And it's quite a lot of money. Themselves, they spend about $2 billion a year on the Chrome browser. They also pay about $20 billion a year to Apple to be the default search engine for Safari, and about $500 million a year to Mozilla to be the default search engine for Firefox. And so this is a very, very big business. And what does all that money buy? So you can probably guess what happens if you give millions or billions of dollars to software engineering teams. But if you haven't seen it happen in person, I can tell you that they hire hundreds of engineers, and those hundreds of engineers write tens of millions of lines of code, because that's just what happens. Like, nobody has ever hired 200 engineers and gotten like a 10,000 line project out of it. And tens of millions of lines of code requires hundreds of engineers to maintain and to continue developing. Anybody who's tried to do anything with Chrome, like Luke was talking about, you quickly feel that it takes quite a lot of people to do anything with it. And if you need hundreds of engineers to develop and maintain something, well, you need that money to keep flowing. So we are now trapped in a little bit of an awkward situation because everyone needs a browser, except the one guy who says he doesn't use one. And the entire industry around browsers is just propped up by this Google search ad revenue. And there is not a single viable option outside of this paradigm. Like, nobody has attempted in earnest to do anything differently than this. There are people who have been experimenting with different income streams, but they're always experimenting like at a thin slice of the layer. So Brave is a good example of that. Like, they are Chromium underneath, but they are trying to find other ways to make money, which is cool, but it's not the whole thing. And to make things even more chaotic, we now have the DOJ. This is 4 days ago. The DOJ is recommending that Google be forced to sell Chrome, and that they can no longer pay other browsers to be the default search engine. So what happens if a judge is okay with this? We have absolutely no idea. Who would buy Chrome, right? Luke would buy Chrome. Okay, good. Good luck raising for that. Yeah. So yeah, they're only... Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, but decision coming later in next month, I think. But it's a mess, right? This whole thing is just a mess. And you might think that now I'm going to say, and this is where I come in because I have a great idea how we can solve all this. And kind of, but I didn't really come here by like looking at the market and identifying an opportunity. So I have to explain why am I here. Because in 2017, I quit big tech. So I used to work at Apple on Safari. And I just left. And I thought I would try to get some kind of new career. But it turns out that I just got into substance abuse instead, because I was a sort of spare time substance abuser when I had a job. And then I didn't have a job suddenly, so I was a full-time substance abuser. And that went just as well as you might expect. I lasted, I think, about 8 months or something like that before my wife said I had to go to rehab. So I did, and it was a beautiful experience. I spent 3 months in state rehab program. And when I graduated from that, I had nothing but time. Because when you do drugs all day. And if you're not doing the drugs, you're thinking about the drugs or like trying to get more drugs. And now I didn't have any of those activities, so I needed to do something. So I just got back into programming. So I started doodling with stuff I always wanted to do, but never did. So I wrote a little operating system kernel. Here's a screenshot of it booting, I think in QEMU or something like that. And then I wrote a little GUI toolkit, because I thought it would be fun to make a GUI toolkit, right? Like windows, buttons, text boxes, stuff like that. And then one day I thought, what if you mash those together? Then you have a graphical operating system. So I did that, and it became Serenity OS, which was named after the Serenity prayer that I learned in rehab. And I had a lot of fun with this. So I was just sitting programming this thing all day and completely replaced one addiction with another, but this was way better. My addiction counselor said that don't worry about it. Like, you can get addicted to this. You can also eat however much you want and do whatever sports you want. But this was my new addiction. So I did a lot of random stuff. Just wrote apps, like a process manager, IRC client, very exciting. Graphical file manager, text editor. I just kept doing this, posting videos to YouTube about it, and built a little community around this as well. So more and more people were hacking on it. And in 2019, we, of course, got Doom running. Thank you. Yes, this is mandatory for all new operating systems and all hardware projects. At some point, you have to run Doom. So we ran Doom, feeling very accomplished. And another random thing that I did, and you might see where this is going, was a simple HTML viewer widget, because I thought it would be cool to have rich text, right? So this is the earliest screenshot of that, just messing around with some CSS colors here. And once I started working on this, it just felt so familiar, so easy, like, ooh, working on browsers again, right? And I just kept messing with this. And the next year, we added JavaScript and HTTPS to this thing, which meant that now we could like try to load real websites, not just HTML and CSS, but like the real things. So we had Reddit kind of sort of working in the old layout. You can see a lot of flaws here, but it was really cool to us back then. And in 2022, we conquered the ACID 3 test. I don't know if anybody here remembers that test, but in 2010 or so, this was like a big standards compliance test that the W3C put out. And I think we were like 12 years behind at this point, but we were the first new open source browser that had passed the test since it was introduced. So this was like the first time that people started taking us a little bit more seriously, because yeah, a lot of people had tried to build new browsers, but nobody got this far, essentially. So later that same year, we ported it to Linux. So until this point, you had to boot into Serenity OS if you wanted to use this browser. So that was kind of cumbersome, let's say, especially for the daily edit compile test cycle that I was in. So this meant that now I could just run the browser on Linux, mess around with it much, much faster. And the GUI for the browser on Linux was called Ladybird. So that's where the name started. And then in 2023, the next year, something starts to happen to me in my head and my heart. I start to feel like this could become a real browser. Like, wouldn't that be cool, right? And more people are getting excited about it as well. Like, everybody I show this thing to, they say, hey, couldn't this become a real browser? And so I'm just brainstorming with my wife, Katalin, who's here today. Thank you for coming. We're talking about, like, how the heck do I do this? Like, what are the actual steps to take this from a funny little thing in the Serenity OS hobby project and turn it into a real browser so that people can actually use it? And my thinking is that people might not want to financially support Serenity OS because it's like a huge hobby playground for hackers, but they might want to financially support Ladybird as a browser for everybody to have. And so I decide I'm going to test the waters with this idea by signing some big sponsors. And then if that works out, I'll hire some people to help me work on this. So this was like the whole plan. And where do you find big sponsors? Well, I had a couple of sponsors already. So I was on Patreon and GitHub sponsors and stuff like that. People had found me through YouTube. And so I was able to score some major sponsorships by just reaching out to some folks in my sponsor list. The first one I tried was Toby from Shopify, who had been sponsoring me forever. And I asked him if he thought, like, hey, we're going to try to make something real out of Ladybird. What do you think? Would Shopify sponsor that? He said, yes, of course. We'll give you $100,000. That was the first person I asked about this. So I was like shocked, right? How well is this working? And then like a week later, I talked to Chris Wanstroth, GitHub co-founder, and I told him about the Toby Shopify thing, and he said, cool, I'll match it. I'm like, oh, geez, okay. I didn't have any way to receive this kind of money, so they were both asking, like, where do we send the money? And I ended up just receiving it on GitHub sponsors as donations through there. I was just not prepared for things moving so fast. And then when I posted about this on Twitter, some anonymous person showed up and gave me another $100,000 in crypto, which was a whole other chapter, but I've paid taxes on it finally. It was a nightmare. But anyway, now I had like $300,000. So within the span of a week, right? So I had to go and execute the plan then. So I hired two of our main contributors, Alex and Andrew, who had already been working on the stuff in their spare time. And it was super easy. I knew they were productive, like, come work for me. And they did. And we just hacked on it for a year, but didn't talk about it, the plan, much still. But at the same time, Chris Wanstroth here and I, we were putting together a nonprofit so that if anybody else wanted to give us $100,000, which is apparently not entirely crazy, we would have some kind of structure to receive that money, because I already felt super awkward with all this money coming to me personally. And, you know, if you want to take money from people, you should have some way of being transparent about it. And a nonprofit structure gives us the ability to say, hey, this is our mission. We're actually going to do this with the money if you give it to us. Next thing that had to happen, though, was that I had to fork Ladybird from Serenity OS. Because up until this point, Ladybird was just a little part of the greater Serenity OS project. And I wanted Serenity to remain sort of a hobby community project for the people who enjoy getting Doom to run on stuff, right? And this was going to have a very different flavor. So I forked Ladybird from Serenity OS and left Serenity OS in the hands of the maintainer group. And then I was free to announce the Ladybird Browser Initiative, which is our nonprofit. And this is the structure that we're in today. And one of our largest time sponsors was FUTO. So I talked to Aaron. He liked what we were doing. And thanks, Aaron. And they pitched in $200,000 here as well. So nowadays, we're really well funded. We have runway to go for quite a while. And this is how I ended up with a browser to fill this gap in the market that I talked about earlier. So let me tell you briefly about the Ladybird team. So this is kind of what it looks like in emoji. There's 7 of us, paid engineers, myself included. And then we also have a large volunteer community of people who just work on Ladybird in their spare time, hang out on Discord, fix random stuff, and then disappear, never to be seen again. Or if they stick around long enough, maybe I hire them, who knows. I've hired everybody so far on our team has been hired out of this community. So I feel very good about that. It seems like the most wholesome way to hire people, right? And what this team does is build Ladybird. So let's talk about what is Ladybird, because in some ways it's been a project in search of a narrative. And we're always evolving the narrative, because it started as, hey, I'm just making this little thing for Serenity OS for fun. But now we have all this money. We're working on this seriously, trying to build a product. So what Ladybird is a new browser and engine based on web standards. So it's not based on Chromium, not based on WebKit, not based on Firefox, not based on anything, just based on standards. And we have no intentions of doing any user monetization. So we're not going to get rich here. We are, in fact, going to be pretty poor. But I think that's okay. There needs to be a browser that doesn't make that much money. And some would say that was supposed to be Mozilla, but I think maybe they went a little astray. But we want to be that browser, right? So that means that we're not going to sell default search placement. We're not going to track users in any way. We're not going to have crypto tokens. We're not going to put ad identifying stuff, ad tech in the browser, any of that stuff. We're not going to try to make money off of you. And we are independent, which means that we take donations and sponsorships, but they're all no strings attached. If you sponsor us, we will put your logo on our website and say, thank you. That's where it stops. If you're familiar with the space, you might recognize that we've sort of taken what a lot of the other big nonprofits are doing and just done the opposite. So a problem that we see is that a lot of the large software nonprofits, they take sponsorships and then give board seats in return. So they sell control over the projects to the highest sponsor. And very importantly, we are also just a browser. We have no side quests. We're not looking for alternative revenue streams. We're not trying to sell you a VPN or, I don't know, anything, really. Nothing. We're just building a browser. Very simple. It's easy to understand. If you donate money to us, it will 100% go to browser development and nothing but browser development. So what are our goals for this project? Well, the first one is obvious. We want to render the web with good stability, security, and performance. That kind of just means that you won't notice any of these aspects of it. I think good performance is when you don't think about performance. Bad performance is when you notice it. And same thing with stability, right? Like good stability is you don't think about stability. We also want to advance the web platform by implementing the web specs and improving them as we go. We are the first people to actually take the web specs and implement them from scratch in a very long time. All the other browsers started like long before the specs existed. They're that old. So we are just taking the specs and implementing them and finding a lot of issues and working with the standards bodies to improve the specs. We want to increase the biological diversity of the browser engine ecosystem. From the meme at the start, you'll see that everybody's building on Chromium now, right? And we think this is sad. We think there should be more browser engines. And an open standard is really only open if it has multiple independent implementations. Otherwise, it's not really an open standard, I don't think. We also want to find a sustainable way to develop browsers with limited funding. This is kind of my favorite thing right now to think about. So, like I said, we're never going to be rich. We're not going to have access to Google ad money because we have set up our nonprofit in such a way that we reject all those forms of funding, which means we have to figure out how the hell do we build one of these things if we can never have more than 15, 20 developers tops, right? And we also want to nurture our organic developer community. And this is part of finding a sustainable way to develop the browser. So my thinking is that if we have a core team of paid engineers that can handle 75% of the work, then the long tail of like random incompatibilities on the web, like my local hairdresser's website doesn't look correct in my hometown in Madagascar, right? We're not going to be able to track all those things down, but we want to empower developers to become sort of temporary deputy browser developers and figure these things out and then help us fix the browser. And right now, we're just planting seeds for this kind of stuff. But I believe that if we keep the browser simple, very hackable, very approachable, and we have excellent documentations for getting people into browser development, we can then sort of leverage our organic community into helping us cover the huge long tail of compatibility issues. So, in terms of timeline, we started a nonprofit last year. You are here at FUTO. And next year, we're going to do an alpha release on Linux and Mac OS. People always ask us, probably not this crowd, but people elsewhere always ask, why not Windows? Because we don't have anybody who knows Windows development very well at the moment, and we only have so many people deal with it, right? If somebody wants to fund a Windows developer to work on this, please hire one. But at the moment, we are experts in Linux and Mac OS, so we're focusing on that. And then we want to do a beta release in 27, followed by a production release for all platforms, including Windows, in 28. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And depending on who you ask, this is either an insane schedule or a extremely slow schedule that is just vaporware. I don't know. I feel like it's pretty balanced. We're making good progress, and we're going to have something worthy of calling alpha next year. We'll see. So here are some screenshots of the browser. They are just some random websites I screenshotted here in the office. And as you can see, these are like real websites that are from the modern web. The modern web generally works, I would say 90 to 95% correctly. But of course, you really notice those remaining 10% because you have little layout glitches, you have little inconsistencies. We select the wrong font or something like that. And every website has some little unique thing that we have to track down. But this is not a toy by any means. Like, these are real websites and they work. They have bad performance, but they work. So if you look at our JavaScript engine, it is called libjs, and this is the spec compliance test that runs every day on a website called test262.fyi. We were recently the top one, the very first in spec compliance, but frickin' SpiderMonkey from Mozilla went and fixed a bunch of stuff, and now they are number one. But we're gonna get back on top. We were bastards. This slide was so much better a few days ago. But yeah, so we've been on top of spec compliance, right? So you throw us some JavaScript, we'll run it. JavaScript is not a problem. It's like the single easiest part of the building a browser is running JavaScript correctly. Quickly is another story, but correctly is easy. And for the web platform, so like all the HTML, CSS, DOM, XML, streams, everything, there is a giant test suite called the Web Platform Tests. This is a joint effort by all the browser vendors to build like a massive battery of tests. And the idea is like whenever an engineer on a browser team from any company creates a browser test, he will put it into this repository and then all browsers can run the test. So there's like 2 million tests. And as you can see, Chrome is doing best on the web platform tests, followed by Firefox and Safari, but then there's us in 4th place. And we're already passing, I think, 1.78 million of the 2 million tests. So we have been making excellent progress on this. I will admit that there were some low-hanging fruit that we focused on first, but the low-hanging fruit is all gone. Now it's just a grind to increase this number, but we are working on it, and it's really fun. And we're also hoping that Flow and Servo will step up their efforts so that we can have a little bit of a competition. Would be nice. But even if they don't, we still have Safari to catch up to, which we will. So let me give you a very quick technical overview of the project. It is a full-stack browser and engine written in C++, really just because that's what Serenity OS was written in. So we just inherited that code. Probably would have used a different language if I started today, but that's not what happened. It's about 425,000 lines of code compared to, I think you said 35 million lines for Chromium. Just to give you an idea of the change, the difference in scope here, right? And all the web technology is written from scratch using spec-driven development. So we're not working from bug compatibility or like imitating another browser or anything like that. We're starting with the spec and like implementing step by step, primarily. And we do use third-party libraries for stuff that isn't web tech. So, you know, like encryption, networking, 2D, 3D graphics, audio, video, image formats, WebP, JPEG, PNG, these kind of things. Good to have. We don't want to implement them. We did implement them for Serenity OS, but our implementations were slow. So they get to live on forever in Serenity OS, but here we are leveraging the very nice open source libraries that exist. And yeah, it runs on Linux and macOS today. Those are our primary development platforms. So I said spec-driven development. So let me just give you a concrete example of what that looks like. So here is a tiny little excerpt from, I think this is the DOM specification, one of the many web specs. This is what it generally looks like in there. It's an algorithm called pre-remove for a child. It has 3 steps, and in our code, it looks like this. So we have the link to this part of the spec, and then we have each spec step as comments, and then under the comment, you can see how that's implemented. And we try to keep everything in sync, and we want the code to look as much as the spec language as possible, which I notice here we could actually improve a little bit. But even so, this is the general idea. And this has been to a tremendous benefit to us because it allows people to onboard themselves very quickly. If they can orient themselves in the specification, they can cross-reference that with our code base super easily. So engineers from other browser teams are telling us that they find our browser incredibly hackable because they already know the specs. They just have to go to the right place in our code base. And we even have people from the W3C working on Ladybird these days because they just enjoy our code base. So that's super cool as well. We are a multi-process architecture. That's table stakes these days, but should still mention it. So we have a UI process here on the left, which can be either Qt or an AppKit Chrome or headless, if you want to run it in headless mode. And then we have a bunch of helper processes on the right for networking, web content rendering, JavaScript, image decoders for WebPs and stuff like that, and a web worker process to host JavaScript workers. So future work for this project, well, there's a lot of it. There's a long way to go, but if we want to break it down, there's a lot of web compatibility, which means making real websites work better. You can right now go and build Ladybird and point it at your favorite website, and you will probably find some issue that needs fixing. So a lot of that. Spec compliance is another thing that we need to do a lot of. We have to pass more of these spec tests from the web platform tests. Now, these two things, they are essentially the same. They're just two different angles to approach the same problem. If you improve web compatibility, you generally do so by following a spec better. And if you improve spec compliance, you generally improve web compatibility, although you might not see how your change affects the other category. But in our team, we have people who vastly prefer one approach over the other, so I just encourage everybody to work in the way that they enjoy. Some people enjoy seeing real websites sort of tighten up and look more correct. Other people like seeing number go up on graph, right? I really like both. So another item future work is site isolation. So some of the stuff that Luke was talking about, where we're following the old model where we want to segregate into separate processes by domain. So today we might put google.com and facebook.com in the same process, but we really don't want to do that if we can avoid it, because we want to be able to sandbox them better and prevent them from talking to each other. We also want to do a bunch of fingerprinting prevention stuff and other privacy features like preventing tracking. And at the moment, it's extremely fingerprintable because our browser looks so unique compared to every other browser. If you go to these fingerprinting tests, essentially smoke starts coming out of the computer, and they just say like, you are the only one with this browser who ever lived. And then there's a bunch of performance work because we have to get to the point where you don't notice performance. This is generally 3 types of things, like don't do the thing, or if you have to do the thing, well, at least cache it. And if you have to do the thing and you can't cache it, well, then do it quickly then, fine. We find that just not doing the thing covers a lot of performance work at the moment, just figuring out what we can avoid. But as we get more sophisticated, there will be more sophisticated performance work. And finally, we have to stay on top of these specifications because unlike hardware specs and stuff like that, these web specifications change every day. Every day somebody wakes up and goes to work at Google and edits the HTML specification. Sometimes it feels like they're doing it just to mess with us, but they're not. They're just trying to make them better. But they're what's called like living standards, and that means that they change all the time. And so part of our work is just like staying up to date with this and adapting our code base to the changes. And of course, we are always looking for more developers. We are trying to grow our developer community, trying to create more browser developers in the world. And it's really not that spooky. If you have ever looked at one of the main browsers out there today, and you've seen that they are 35 million lines of code or whatever, it's understandable that you will get scared off. But we are just 425K lines of code. That's not that scary. Like, you can wrap your head around that if you spend some time in it, if you're really interested. And that's the end of my talk. So, thank you.